I'm going to spend about 5 minutes or so before we have our first keynote from Linda, just giving you a little bit of background about the Access initiative and also some highlights over the last year. I'm aware that there are some people here today who have not been to an Access assembly before or have not necessarily engaged with Access before. So I thought, and actually even for those of us who are very familiar, maybe way too familiar with Access, sometimes it's good to look at the big picture because we get drawn into very small parts of it and it's a complex machinery. So as you can see from the slide in front of you, Access stands for Advancing Capacity in Climate and Environment Social Science, and it's a 5-year initiative funded by the Economic and Social Research Council. And the idea, the purpose, the rationale for Access is to champion the social science contributions to tackling a range of environmental problems. And it's led by social science experts at a number of universities, but I guess the crucial thing to signal right from the beginning is that it's not just a university endeavour, and central to our leadership team is the Nature Agency's Social Research Network, some of whom are in this room, some of whom are online, and who have been absolutely critical to the development and success of Access so far. And the other two words, I suppose, that for me are really important about this slide is that we're a growing network. We're not a closed shop. We're not a cozy club. We're not a little group that wants to stay looking at itself. We want to look outwards and develop and embrace more partners because we're interested in just spreading the word and the insights that we think the social sciences can bring. So that's that in terms of who we are. But why do we need Access in the first place? Why would you need an initiative like this? I guess the quick answer to this is speak to Susie and Tracy, who are in the room from ESRC. Maybe they can tell you why they thought it was a good idea to put something like this together. But not wishing to put them on the spot, these are at least some of the reasons why you might think that Access is a timely investment for ESRC and UKRI. Certainly, many of us in the room are worried about the urgent need to tackle a whole range of environmental problems at the moment. Many of us have been interested in environmental challenges for decades, and the news doesn't always get better, I'm afraid. It used to be about whether climate change would occur or not. It used to be about whether we could limit that to 1 degree or 1.5 degrees. It looks like we're going well beyond that in so many indicators. So we need to recognize the scale of the challenges and find solutions. And those solutions are very likely to be interdisciplinary. It's incredibly unlikely that any single kind of expertise or knowledge is going to make a difference on its own. So how do we enable that interdisciplinarity to happen? And what's the social science presence or position in that? For several decades, people have been talking about social sciences being positioned at the end of a very long pipe. So when the problems are identified or the solutions are identified, it's only then that you might start speaking to somebody who's a specialist in human decision-making or institutions or structures or social norms to try and figure out if you can find an answer so that that technological solution or whatever it might be acceptable across society. But of course, we need the social sciences to move up that pipe and to be involved in framing the question from the start. And that's something that we've seen seldom, but there are plenty of good examples around, and that's what Access is trying to enable as well. It's also the case that the social science contribution to environmental problems is really quite fragmented. There are lots of different funding bodies funding small degrees of social science, and that social science itself is very varied in terms of method, discipline, approach, etc. And we're not always that good, I think, at coming together and speaking with a unified voice on behalf of all of that knowledge. So maybe we need to build more effective structures for advising policy or advising decisions and enabling social scientists, particularly early career researchers, to have the confidence to go into interdisciplinary environments or cross-sectoral conversations and say, okay, I'm a social scientist, this is what we've got to contribute, this is why it's worth listening to. So, I know I've got very little time, so I just want to say a little bit about how Access works, because I think we try and be a little bit different. First of all, we're not just a project. We are a project, of course. We've got lots of moving parts. We've got tasks that need to be completed. But we first and foremost try and act like a team. And that means we avoid siloed working. And where possible, we really promote face-to-face engagement by the people who are involved, including this assembly. So it's about meeting together, developing strong relationships and trust, and then building outwards across our networks. And you'll hear about our guiding principles a lot over the next day or two, but they really do try and forge a novel approach. So it's not just EDI separately, equality, diversity, inclusion, equity, diversity, inclusion. It's not just about sustainability, but looking at some of the challenges when you bring these principles together. It's not easy to implement them. It's easy to develop the policy. I've mentioned the fact that the nature agencies are critical to access and the way we operate. But we also try and embed capacity building right across every single thing that we do. So we will have an early career researcher on our leadership team. If we have a flexible fund, we want to put the capacity building of early career researchers into that. And we have quarterly meetings with a range of government bodies in our policy and practice working group. So just before I finish, I'm going to skip this slide because we haven't got too much time, but I just want to highlight two things we've done over the last year that I think have been particularly noteworthy and successful. Now, I know Saffron is in the room somewhere, so shout out to you now. One of the nicest things we do is we have this annual retreat which brings this small cohort of early career researchers together in our leadership college. You can see the kind of feedback we're getting from the participants from this year's retreat. And it's about building a network, enabling capacity, empowering people to feel like they can contribute to discussions about leadership. And it seems to be working really well, and we'll have several more retreats over the next few years. But the idea of bringing the same cohort of diverse social scientists together year upon year is something that really looks like it's a beneficial activity to do. The second point I wanted to make is about our innovative mechanism called the Flexible Fund. It's 20% of our grant from ESRC, and there's some interesting numbers here. But we're trying to, again, innovate how we distribute funds rather than just passing it out. How do we build our guiding principles into the way that we distribute funding? How do we innovate in that way? So we put ECRs at the center of bids and calls. We try and enable partnership building. We try and look at whether people are actually delivering EDI and sustainability in their justification of resources. And I guess the key thing for me here is untapped potential. We have a £1 million budget for this flexible fund, which sounds like a lot of money, but we've had almost £20 million of application value from the research community. So Access is successfully mobilizing the social science research community, but we're also disappointing an awful lot of people, and that worries me too, because all those people are ECRs. All those people are people having conversations with stakeholders, but they're not getting too far here just because we haven't got enough resource. Now, I know resources are scarce, of course, difficult, but the untapped potential here is extraordinary. So let's see what we can do about that. I'm going to stop now. You all know why you're here. It's the Access Annual Assembly. It's, for many reasons, the showcase of our year. It's when we try and put our guiding principles into practice. And obviously, this is a very particular moment in the middle of a general election campaign. So at least one keynote is not able to be here, unfortunately, because of the timing. But don't worry, we've signed her up for next year, so she's not escaping. She's just putting it off. Anyway, who knows what the next couple of years will bring. We've got 2 more years of these assemblies. Access is about halfway through. But anyway, I'm hoping that this will be just as successful and as much fun as the last 2 years. We've got a wonderful array of people here and speakers. We've got excellent food. We've got pretty good weather, today at least. And we've got very exciting walks planned and showcases planned of events. So looking forward to it. And I'd just like to hand over now to our first keynote,